Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us on today's webinar, Seizing the Opportunities of Uncertainty, 5 Strategies for Success in a Hybrid Work Environment. Our presenters today are Chris Olson, Director of Corporate Strategy and Partnerships at Class Technologies, and Claude Werder, SVP and Principal Analyst at Brandon Hall Group. I would like to extend a thank you to Class Technologies for sponsoring today's webinar. And a little bit about Chris. Chris Olson is a corporate learning and development consultant at Class. He brings 20 plus years of organizational effectiveness experience. Primarily operating in the finance industry, Chris oversaw learning and development, performance, employee experience, and engagement. He has led 10 national bank merger and acquisition change management initiatives. By leveraging technology that focused on experience and modern learning practices, he delivered skills and talent when organizations needed it most. Before joining Class, Chris was also supporting one of the top HR research and consulting firms, Red Thread Research. For those of you that aren't familiar with Brandon Hall Group, we are a research and analyst firm that empowers excellence in organizations around the world through our research and tools. A quick mention that our certification programs are currently open, and we do offer programs to become a certified learning strategist, a certified diversity, equity, and inclusion leader or champion, and more. Please visit our main website, www.brandonhall.com, for more information. Your participation in our surveys is one of the most crucial components of our research. So if you have a few minutes to spare and see any topics that you would like to take a survey for, it's greatly appreciated. All participants do receive a piece of complimentary research once the results have been analyzed. And again, you can visit our main website for access. And lastly, a few logistics. This presentation is being recorded. The recording and the slides will be provided to everyone within 24 hours of the webinar in a follow-up email. If you would like to ask a question or engage in a discussion with our presenters today, please ask your questions or make your comments in the question box found on your control panel. If you would like to download a copy of the presentation instantly, you may find a link in the handout section also on your control panel. And without further delay, I will turn it over to Claude to take us through the agenda.
Well, thank you, Melissa, and thank you to Class Technologies for sponsoring today, and to everyone for taking the time. We have a lot to share. We're looking forward to presenting to you today. We're going to start by describing what we see as the current state of the hybrid work environment, and then we're going to talk through 5 strategies we believe are central to excelling in this environment. So first, we'll look at inclusion and engagement from the employee's point of view. Number 2 is enabling closer partnership between frontline leaders/managers and employees. Third is embracing new ways of working. Number 4 is to personalize learning and going beyond traditional classroom, virtual, or e-learning. And last but not least is, in essence, recruiting your own employees during this process. So moving on, Chris, do you want to start us off?
Sure, be happy to. Thanks, Claude. Yeah, so one of the things that I think we want to share, we'll go through a lot of Brandon Hall's research here that Claude's going to walk us through. Some of the sentiments I just want to share to at least start off to provide context of kind of why we're talking about this topic today, and just kind of share some of the sentiments that we're hearing from the market itself. So in all this process, I've been hearing a lot around, how to survive in a hybrid environment, right? Things like that. And I think the more when we talk to our customers, to our clients, to those in the market, what I'm really discovering is more around how do we change, and how do we handle with the change? How do we shift to digital adoption? How do we kind of move to embrace, and how do we adjust what we've been doing to just handle with the disruptions that come along with either a remote or hybrid workplace environment? So I just kind of want to give some of that context, because a lot of what we're hearing, and even as of recently, the CEO of Microsoft was even describing something as the human paradox here, where they're trying to, everyone wants to be able to have the flexibility of working from home, right? To provide the ability for people to be, to have their work-life balance and kind of structure their days as they see fit. But so they don't want to lose what they've kind of, really recently realized that they've become to appreciate and enjoy. And then also they, at the same time though, they want to have that in-person experience and that human connection and feel. So how do you make that happen, right? So I think that's kind of really the big purpose of what we're here to talk about and why we're here today. And so now we're going to go through some of the data here that's going to talk through a lot of the challenges that we hear. But when you think about it, as Claude walks us through some of the research that they're going to kind of display, is that it's really more, if you think about it, it's grappling with the change and kind of the process. And so we'll kind of go over what we believe everyone's going to tackle and what they're saying that they're trying to tackle, and kind of some of their areas of focus and how they'll try to do that. So I'm going to turn it over here to Claude here to kind of walk us through the data, but I just want to give that little bit of context up front to say, really, there's more to be happy about than be concerned about, is what I would say, that we're just scratching the surface of possibilities of what we're able to achieve with technology coming up to meet us for the moment of working in the remote and hybrid environments here. But I'll turn it over here to Claude to get us started, and I'll look forward to the rest of the conversation as we add more color to it as we go along.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, I just want to echo what Chris says. I think overall, when I talk to people, and I talk to a lot of managers and employees and HR people every day in my research, people are excited about the possibilities. They're just a little worried how they're going to get there. But very excited for the fact that there's not going to be going back to before. There's going to be a new something, but getting there is going to be the key. So right now, we're kind of in this state of flux, where 65% of organizations believe that less than half the workforce is going to be on site over the next 6 months. So that's taking us all the way, at least into April and perhaps beyond. And then about half of organizations, it's 50-50 split pretty much, say they're ready to deal with whatever comes over the next 6 months. But they're generally optimistic, but they also know it's not going to be easy. And one of their levels of concern, of course, right now, is maintaining employee health and safety. That's been the one of the key, if not the most important thing that everybody's been focused on from the very beginning. That continues along with maintaining performance. So back at the beginning of the pandemic, maintaining performance was not a very big concern at all, because people were really focused on just keeping everybody engaged and healthy and safe and just dealing with what was in front of them. But there is now more focus on the business, right? Maintaining performance, collaborating, maintaining the culture, maintaining fairness. So there's a balance, but still employee safety is number one. Then if we move over to the next 6 months, on the next slide, more than half of those surveyed said they have a lot of great challenges that they're facing. Not surprisingly, based on everything you've heard, is talent retention, along with employee engagement, hiring new employees, and effectively managing the workforce. The biggest issue I hear out there is really about how much the hybrid work environment is really going to occur over past the next few months. In other words, how flexible are employers going to be in the long run? When I talk to rank and file employees rather than managers or executives, I hear a lot about how their lives are changed, and commuting every day to work is not only unattractive, but often unfeasible. And they understand the need to work on site some of the time, but what will that look like? And many believe strongly that less on-site work is better. Some talk about leaving work. I'm sure you've all heard some of this too. Leaving work, leaving their jobs if their employees are not flexible. And then from the employer side, there's this general support for flexibility, but also a strong belief that eventually people need to be together in one place more than they are now. So there's a lot that needs to get sorted out here over the next few months, but we've come up with some strategies that we think are really solid, no matter which way things turn. But before we drill down into the strategy, now that we've kind of set the stage and the current state, we kind of want to see what you're feeling, what you're thinking. So we've got a poll question for you coming up, and that is a very simple question. How would you rate your organization's ability or readiness to excel in a hybrid work environment? Would you say, hey, we've got problems, we got, as I said here, big trouble? Are you struggling but making progress? Do you feel like you're in a good position to succeed? Or do you think that you've really got it handled, that you're rocking it, that you're doing a great job and foresee a bright future? So that how you answer this will be helpful in helping to guide us through our comments a little bit, and as we go through the strategies for success that we put together. So let's see what people are saying. So really good news is about half are in a position to succeed. Another 22% believe they're rocking it. So that's amazing. And about a quarter, a little less than a quarter, believe they're struggling to make progress. So hopefully these strategies will help everybody and provide some insight. And maybe you're doing a lot of this already, and if so, please share some of your comments along with questions, and that we can talk about as we go or at the end of the presentation. So let's move on now to strategy number 1. So no matter where you are in your journey, we think, as I said, these strategies will help you. First one is build and sustain a culture of inclusion and engagement. Now, the conversation around inclusion has tended toward race and gender over the last couple of years, and that's certainly understandable with everything that's happened, and they're both still critical and will remain critical. But it's also important to remember, and I say this because I talk to a lot of people who are really focused on diversity, equity, inclusion, but they don't really grasp that inclusion goes far beyond the race and gender. It's really about leveraging every bit of talent and innovation that you can generate from your workforce. And to do that, you have to include them, give them a sense of belonging and trust, which is essential in navigating this uncertainty we're all going through. Now, we've been doing research on DE&I for more than 5 years now, and the one thing we've learned is that most organizations truly believe they are inclusive right now, but they don't necessarily, when you ask them about the things they do in the organization, they don't necessarily demonstrate those behaviors. And some of those behaviors are very basic, and I just want to touch on a few of them on the next slide. Here are the top 6 behaviors that people in our research thought had a high impact on inclusion. And you'll notice they're really basic. I mean, there's nothing overly complicated about some of these basic human behaviors, right? Treat different opinions with respect, being considerate and respectful with everyone. Some are maybe take a little bit of training or sophistication, challenging behaviors that are not fully inclusive and suggesting new ideas and solutions to work issues, and a couple of others there. But these types of behaviors are really key in building that environment of psychological safety that's important for employees so that they can bring their true selves to work. So let's hit on a few drivers of inclusion engagement that we've come up in the research. So over the course of a few years, we've built some models through which organizations can see inclusion engagement through the eyes of employees. And that's very important, to really put yourself into your employee's shoes, so to speak. So we've divided the drivers into 6 buckets. Let's just go over them briefly. First is well-being. In most research surveys, probably not a surprise to you, promoting employee well-being is a high priority. I think the key is that the wellness goes beyond health. So it includes feeling that the organization is fully invested in their best interests. It includes some flexibility in the work environment, as we've mentioned already, understanding the need for work-life balance, and supporting their involvement of activities outside of work. Chris, any thoughts on what I've just those few things I've covered?
Yeah, as we look at the drivers of inclusion engagement, I think wellness, well-being, it's a hot topic right now. I think you're seeing a lot of players come into the space, which is real interesting, that they're trying to leave their mark in different aspects and how they tackle that. I think the real kicker and takeaway for this is really you have to put yourselves in the other person's shoes, right? To think about what that experience is like. I mean, at this point, I don't know how single mothers have gotten through this pandemic gainfully employed. Goodness gracious, they are absolute heroes in that. And to think of all the things that they have to overcome, and logistically and scheduling wise and coordination. So I mean, just understanding what that is, looking at your employees as if they're customers, to understand how we can provide the best experience for them, and provide them to be effective and to not burn out, because last thing you want is turnover, right? So that's kind of the key in a lot of this. But really hone in and the same way an approach that I would take to a lot of these things that Claude's going to run through as far as these different avenues to really tackle for what are the drivers of inclusivity and engagement, is to think of it as something not as an event, but more as a journey, something that is going to be sustainable, and that is going to be actionable, and that you will actually kind of respond to and have, put some skin in the game here to help supply. Because if you see, there's a lot of memes out there where they kind of mock a lot of organizations' approaches to this, because with the authenticity that your organization would provide to address these areas, I would just make sure that you do it with merit, so that it's something that it's not a quick fix, but something that you're very dedicated and serious about. I think that inclusion and inclusivity is just such an important hot topic. The thing that I would just also chime in, to not steal your thunder, Claude, but I think you putting belonging on this is right on the money, because that is that's the constant message I keep on hearing about when I gather with other conferences with peer leaders that are chief diversity officers. I keep on hearing about the sense of belonging is absolutely critical in having a successful culture for inclusivity. So I just want to kind of bring out those two topics that you've highlighted there, just the importance of them, but I'll turn it back over to you to go through your details on belonging, though.
Well, and to your point on belonging, I think everybody is going to experience a sense of belonging differently. So you mentioned the single mothers. So what's going to be important to them to have a sense of belonging may be very different from somebody working in a foreign country or in a different circumstance. So that's why we really focus on, look at it through your employee's eyes. You may think you're doing everything you need to do to create these, a sense of well-being or sense of belonging, but is it going to look that way to the people who are affected? So let's move on to the next slide. And the next bucket is feeling valued, which is similar but a little different than belonging. This addresses things ranging from equitable compensation to feeling appreciated and recognized for contributions, and having some autonomy on how they work and their schedule and that type of thing. One of the biggest areas here is also feedback, which organizations are notoriously mediocre at. Feedback to a lot of people, I hear this from a lot of people, believe it or not, is that feedback is the ultimate form of feeling valued, because somebody, whether it's your peer or your supervisor, is taking the time to focus on you. They've got all these stresses and everything, but they're taking the time to tell you what they think, whether it's positive or growth oriented. So that's important. And then employee development is something that I think sometimes we don't put enough. Everybody thinks learning is important, right? But we don't necessarily look at it as a driver of inclusion and engagement. But having opportunities to learn, being fully supported by managers in doing their jobs, having opportunities to grow in various ways, projects, teamwork in their jobs, preparing for new roles, that is very much helps build a sense of belonging and engagement. Again, because the company is investing. But how people feel about feeling valued or the level of development, again, depends on their situation. So that creates a need for managers to really personalize and see through their employees' eyes how they're going about this. The final two are career advancement and alignment with values and mission. So career advancement is a little different than employee development. It's part of it, but it's really giving employees a chance to take control of their own careers, to have discussions about possible roles, and to really feel like the organization is invested in advancing their careers. The alignment with values, mission, and goals is employers are not often transparent about what they really stand for. And so sometimes employees just see the company as somebody who gives them a paycheck and is producing a product or a service, and what they care about is making money. Making money is fine, but employees also need to know that their employment provides them with value beyond their jobs. And this has kind of led to a movement of where employers are talking more about having a purpose beyond profit, to give employers a reason to be connected beyond their job. So all of this taken together drives a sense of psychological safety that we talked about that enables employees to bring their best selves to work, whether at an office building or in their homes. But these behaviors are especially important in a dispersed hybrid workforce. Organizations that do a good job, we found, tend to do a better job in navigating ongoing change. So now let's jump to strategy number 2, enabling frontline leaders and employees to connect. The road to employees feeling included flows through their managers, right? The frontline leader or manager is the primary connection point between employees and the organization. But study after study shows that those connections are really not very deep and usually revolve around getting work done and not much more. And managers get a lot of criticism for that. I talk to a lot of HR folks who are driving leadership development programs, and they just wring their hands over their managers not being good enough at giving feedback and providing coaching. Some of that criticism may be deserved, but they're also stuck in a system that does not really enable them to have strong relationships with employees. And the hybrid environment provides some opportunity here because managers now are more dispersed from employees. They're not a couple of desks or a couple offices away. So naturally, they have to take extra effort to connect. And in many organizations we've talked to, a lot of managers have really stepped up to the plate. And many of those organizations have actually reported higher levels of engagement. The key is keeping that going as time goes on and adapting behaviors and routines that really allow managers to connect with employees on an ongoing basis beyond getting work done. So Chris, any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, clearly echoing a lot of what you're saying. I hear a lot of where organizations are trying to focus on managers to get to get the broader impact of the organization, to tap into their broader teams. So it really does come down to the key relationships between the managers and their employees for how they can help support that. So yeah, I'm looking forward to the data that you can provide, but all I can say is like completely right on the right note here for frontline leaders to be able to connect with the employees is going to be your ability to be effective as an organization.
Okay, so let's drill into it. And let's just start on where we are now. A Brandon Hall Group study earlier this year showed that only about 1 in 5 organizations believe their managers are consistently providing feedback or coaching to their employees. That's probably not a surprise. On the next slide, when managers and employees do hold check-ins or regular meetings, the most frequent topic is dealing with mutual challenges, which is kind of good because it's not just about the manager, it's also about the employee, but it's about revolving around getting work done for the most part. It's far less often that managers and employees have development discussions or talk about how the employees are feeling about their workload or burnout or fatigue, or talk about the future. We're not suggesting that you have long, counseling conversations, but checking in on the employee, how they're feeling, what they're thinking, and having relatively frequent career advancement conversations. And by that, I mean even 2-3 times a year. Only 9% of organizations say managers and their team members frequently discuss opportunities for advancement, whether that's a new job or a team project or something that they can do to help the team. So if we move on to the next, in addition, and this is kind of at the heart of the issue, most managers struggle to find time to learn, to improve themselves, or to make themselves a priority. And this goes back to the system that they're working in. So many employers have created what I call a vicious circle, where there's little focus on manager-employee conversations beyond getting work done, and also little time for managers to learn so that they can get better. And so the system is kind of set up where everybody is disconnected or connected at a very superficial level beyond the ability to build these relationships and a sense of belonging that's so important in driving this hybrid environment. So what I hear over and over from managers I interview, and I interviewed one that said something like this just today, this morning. The common refrain is something like this: I love talking to my employees. I want to do a better job of coaching and helping them out and making them feel good about where they are. But I am so stressed out and so focused on getting my job done and all my different responsibilities that all I have time to do is touch base. And that may get work done and that may get the job done, but it doesn't build the connections that are needed for success in the hybrid environment. So something needs to change. And of course, how you do that depends a little bit on your environment and your situation. But the tact that most organizations take to improve the situation has been historically just investing more and more money into leadership development each year. But nothing really changes. Leadership development is generally not considered effective. And a lot of that is because improving leadership is about, in the end, changing behaviors, being more inclusive, etc. But most leadership development, while it's beginning to change now, it's still event-based, classroom-based. So you can teach concepts in this environment, but you can't really change behaviors, which takes practice and reinforcement, which we're going to talk about in a little bit. So, but we are seeing, as this graphic shows, that organizations are beginning to see that they have to practice, they have to focus more on practical skills for leaders and give them a chance to think critically and really set their own priorities and be more strategic in how they approach their jobs.
Yeah, and if I could chime in on some of this here, Claude.
Sure. Absolutely.
Great, thank you. Some of the things I would encourage is, it's kind of funny, a couple of things that you point out. One is the usual catch-22 we hear a lot about is, hey, we need to provide training and development opportunities for people to grow, and also myself included, I want to get better at my job so that I can move up. And so you spend all this time to bring all these great learning and development programs and opportunities for everyone, but then no one has any time to do it. So I think that's where you have to ask yourself some hard questions. And basically, I think it's really about creating a culture of learning within your organization is going to be the key driver to making a lot of that happen, because the catch-22 is a trade-off of, I want to grow, but I have no time to be able to spend on that and based on the deadline. So I think that's where I'm starting to see a lot of organizations take a different turn around productivity to prioritize the opportunities for development, which also brings in a lot of those sentiments around well-being, because you're removing some of the stress and the burnout from all of the transactional hard deadline dates of achieving goals and objectives. And I think what they're finding is that it's more of an investment that they're making on the culture of the organization and the people within it. And so I would just encourage everyone to kind of take a different look at how you would approach these tactics to achieve these objectives, because I think what you're kind of alluding to is that everyone continues to do the same thing, spend the money on the leadership development, making those skills and trying to provide them, but really it's kind of remaining status quo. And the other thing I would say around as we talk about frontline managers, is that we are, or frontline leaders and how they communicate and connect with their team members, is usually we talk about performance management being that way of providing the coaching and feedback opportunities. But I think there's a lot of exciting things that are happening in that space, and it's not necessarily just technology doing it. I think it's the different approaches and methods in which people are applying performance management. For instance, one of the things that we were tackling where we wanted to create a culture, a coaching culture, more so than performance, where we would basically, if you did 3 coaching sessions with your direct reports, you actually are omitted and not required to do a performance management review. And so because we found more value in that than in getting a rating system, that those are some of the different kind of more progressive tactics that we kind of took in some of my previous organizations. Additionally, I would also encourage, as we talk about feedback a lot, one other thing to think about with our leaders as they're doing their check-ins and one-on-ones, maybe what you do is you have them coach up as well. And so it's not so much always, from the top down in your org chart. Maybe you make it up, down, left, and right. And so that way that there's opportunities for everyone to be heard. That's not an easy shift, but what I think you'll find is a lot of value and a lot more engagement when those are providing feedback to their manager and their direct report org chart. And I think there'll be a lot of surprises, and I think a lot of bridges made in that process. So just a couple things to kind of look at from the traditional kind of check-in model that we've kind of been doing. I think there's a lot of exciting progressive methods that are taking shape in the market lately.
Some great stuff there, Chris. And Melissa, why don't we jump over to the next slide and just, Chris, I think you had a slide coming up where maybe you can just continue or wrap up what you were saying. Jump to the next slide there, Melissa.
Oh yeah, so in the one of the things that that Claude was presenting was obviously the different kind of traits that we have for leaders that we find effective and kind of what everyone's kind of seeking out to try to bring about within their organizations. And so one of the things that I've been seeing a lot more, and kind of this is a little bit more of a prediction of where I think it's going to become increasingly more so, is going to be the trait of adaptability. And so the reason being is that as things continue to change and evolve, and I think it's happening a lot more faster, everyone's cheese is being moved. There's always a new process, a new system that's going to be coming into play. And so everyone's ability to respond to that is going to be the thing that I think that sets others apart from those that just cannot adapt and go with the flow. So one of the interesting things that I found in researching around that theory of mine is that I found that IBM actually did a study where they found the willingness to be flexible and just adapt to change was their top critical skill. And that was in 2019, before we had all the major disruptions that we've had in the marketplace. So I can only imagine that if we recreated that study, it would actually illuminate that even more. And so the other thing that I'm seeing on that topic of adaptability is that obviously we've got the IQ where we have the intelligent quotient, and now the other popular thing that's come into the place is EQ for emotional intelligence. And now what's coming out is there's what I'm seeing is a lot of AQ, which is adaptability quotient. So actually rating and being able to address and assess individuals' ability to respond and adapt to change. Some also might, just to capture all the different corporate buzzwords, there's also the AQ could stand for agility quotient, but they're not really far from each other. But this is just something I want to call out because I believe that this is going to be something where you're going to hear more about in the future.
Absolutely agreed, and I think we're going to touch on that a little bit more. We've got a lot to get to yet in the next 27 minutes or so, but before we do, let's hit again and ask you where you are on this. So we've thrown a lot at you about leadership and different things, but we want to know now, which of the following is most important to improve manager-employee partnerships? Do you think it's the culture change that we kind of alluded to? Do you think it's more training so that managers can have more effective one-on-ones? Is it more direction and enablement from top leadership? Is it a combination of above or maybe something else? Or everything's great. You're doing great the way it is and life is good. Let us know what you think, and then we'll move on to our final three strategies here. And we'll start picking up the pace a little bit. So Melissa, let us know when we're ready. I'll be interested to see what people are thinking.
Sure, we'll give folks just another couple seconds here so we get a good sample size from our audience. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and close the poll and share the results.
Okay. So yeah, not surprising. It's a combination or something else. I really do think it's a combination, and that's kind of what we were aiming at here. Is there's a lot of things that need to come together, and I think the key is creating a strategy to do that makes sense for each organization. So let's move on to strategy number 3, and I'll turn it over to Chris. This is embracing new ways of working.
Yeah, so really, I mean, as everyone has kind of probably figured out, that we've had to adapt with new ways of working from a lot of different things, from working remotely, how you manage and coach your employees remotely, to what are the different tools and systems you're using today, security requirements. I mean, just thinking of what people are allowed to do. How do you provide printers to people at home? Like, it's just kind of everything kind of has adjusted. And so the good news is that productivity was not lost in the process. I think a lot of the executives that were kind of against the new ways of working that the market has kind of been asking for, and the workforce has been asking for quite some time, has finally been embraced and has really kind of proven itself. So now it's just about getting it even, enhancing that even more. So I think the things that I would call out in this process is that concepts around technology and how we approach that. I don't think the answer is more technology all the times, even though I work for a learning technology company. I think that we got to look at things to identify them from a critical standpoint of making sure that the strategy is in place and that the technologies we choose to use and the policies we implement are going to be in alignment with that from a higher perspective, instead of bringing something in. Because if you have a bad process in place, you're basically just going to make that bad process more efficient with your shiny new technology that you bring in. So you want to make sure it's very sensible in how you bring that in and provide context, which is more important. Because oftentimes, if you want to skip to the next slide for me, for technology, is that really what happens if you miss that context, and then it's going to get lost in the shuffle. Because we have a mantra actually at class where we believe that technology doesn't solve the problems, but that people solve the problems. And really capturing the feedback from everyone is really what will essentially help shape. Again, if you treat your team members like customers, it's really going to help and benefit you in the long run as you're implementing your organizational wide initiatives, and technology strategy is going to be one of those. And the reason that I want to say, even once you do select your technology and bring it into the world, you want to make sure that you provide the right context and how your organization is going to use it for those that are new to it. For instance, if you go to the next slide, you'll see an image of my friend, Mr. Adam here. So I'll leave his last name out for anonymity's sake. But he's a very intelligent guy, works for General Motors, where he provides where he enhances the human experience for those within the automobiles for GM vehicles, enhancing the intuitive design of your dashboard systems and everything like that. Very intelligent, very smart, well-to-do, very tech-friendly. However, with as techy as he can be, he gave me a story that I had to share, because one, I love to publicly embarrass my friends, but also I thought it was just kind of applicable for setting the tone for context around intention of technology. One of those is going to be where he was using the app Shazam, where it tells you the name of the song that you hear when you hold it up to the microphone. Well, what he thought was you sang into it and it just would know the words and then it would tell you the song. So in doing so, singing into a smartphone, he actually accidentally triggered Siri, which then proceeded to call his ex-girlfriend on a phone call while he sang the chorus of a love song to her. And then by the end of the chorus, they had a very awkward conversation. And so if he understood the point of how the Shazam app worked in the context of that, it would have been a much more different experience. The poor guy additionally had another instance where he was, had one of those unfortunate incidences when he wasn't ready for his webcam to be turned on during a web conference meeting at his organization. And so now at first glance, when you see this, obviously embarrassing and awkward, but how did you get in that position, right? I think we need to understand where people are coming from their different environments. And so this allows a little bit of a humorous take on it, because what happened is that as he came on camera, not knowing that he was not wearing a shirt during the meeting, the context that was missing, if you would read the additional post comments here of the post, is that he was at home working from home where his air conditioning unit went out and it was 95-degree weather with extreme humidity levels. So in order to be comfortable, that's what he was doing to try to attend meetings as he was working from home. But now we need to understand and take into consideration the different working environments that people are in at home as we bring the new technology into space and provide grace when needed. So as we continue on here with the next slide, one of the things that we want to do is we want to take that experience and environment and what everyone is placed in to really understand, and this is for class and our approach to this, but I think it's synonymous with with what you would do as you select your technology in your organizations, is that we want to take a look for what's missing. What are those pain points that were, in that physical environment or in the previous process and stage in what you were doing previously before? And then we went into build that and bring that in to the virtual environment. So what we did is we did a kind of pain point cross analysis of what there was for features and what people were used to. And then if you go to the next slide, what we wanted to do is take what we had in web conference tools, but build upon that to add in those learning tools that are missing from that space that weren't built for the digital environment by itself. And so that's how class was born in what we were doing to address kind of the needs for everyone as they were trying to build their learning and development programs live virtually for instructor-led sessions. And so that's just to kind of take some of the consideration for what we want to do and what we build and where we came from. And if we go to the next slide here, I want to turn it over here to Claude to not only address some of the different features that we've added, but I'll let him speak to this data because there's some other additional features that we built on class that is in direct correlation with what he's about to share here.
Yeah, this is pretty simple. That as much as we've adapted new technologies of all sorts in the last year and a half, when you talk to people about their experience, most still think they're not anywhere close to being optimized, that they have a long way to go. Some of it is they're dealing with multiple platforms and they're not always compatible, or people struggle to adopt. But there's also the idea of just, as we've kind of talked about, put the technology in context and make it work for people. And that has less to do with technology sometimes than it does with how you use it and how people embrace it and the context in which it's used, as Chris mentioned. So we've still got a long way to go, and I think organizations need to be really open about how they're going to tweak things, how they're going to change things in order to make the technology work as well as it can to deliver the kind of collaborative environment that you need. Chris, I'll finish up and then we'll move on to the next.
Yeah, and the only thing I'll add on there, just to harp on the importance of collaboration in this, is that we've actually even changed the tagline of our company based on a result of that. Before it used to be adding training and learning tools to Zoom, but now what we've really embraced and really found out from everyone is that they're all about the human connection. So what we did is we've actually changed it to our tagline to be bringing human connection to the virtual world, because that is really the key. That's where the magic happens, is in the collaboration. And so we designed our breakout rooms to be different and unique to be able to tackle that, to really enhance the collaboration, because that's where where we find most effectiveness comes from versus the traditional lecture type model. So.
And that's really an excellent segue actually into our next strategy, which is to personalize learning, because personalizing learning is not really, to me, it's a little bit of a misnomer. It's not actually personalizing it for each individual, it's contextualizing it, right? And the key to that is getting away from lectures, getting away from non-interactive learning, and creating learning experiences. So if we go to the next slide, historically, learning has been very slow to adapt to personalized learning, and there's been this, what's the word? We've kind of been stuck in the mud on live ILT, but with the pandemic, a lot of that changed. We had to go to more virtual learning. And now our research is showing that pretty much everybody's embracing the need for personalized learning. 82% of the companies are currently working to improve their approach, and 64% say business leaders are pushing for it, 70% say learners are pushing for it. So that's great, because everybody understands that it needs to get better. And collaboration, along with some other things that Chris is going to talk about, is a big part of that. But the concept of personalizing learning, of making it more collaborative, expanding what learning means, is incredibly important for excelling in the hybrid environment. Chris?
Yeah, great, thanks. if we hop over to the next slide here, just to really kind of give a little bit more thought process around how you create the context, is that I really think it just kind of revolves around human-centered design. And so designing your learning programs within an empathetic way, understanding the needs of the learners, that should come first in the process of how you build that out. So first thing I would kind of, again, echo sort of similar to the sentiments around diversity, equity, inclusion that we mentioned before, was engage yourself in the daily workflow to understand kind of what it is, what does the daily work life look like in through the eyes of your different personas, of your stakeholders within your organization. Once you understand that, you understand the pain points and the skills that they need to be successful. And so after a lot of research, focusing on that, trying to solve for those problems, seek feedback from the learners about what they're experiencing today, for what's missing, what they're getting that's working and what isn't working, so for you to refine and enhance that. Now, it's something you have to open yourselves up. It's not always an easy process, but it's going to be something that will benefit you in the long run. Now, the additional problem too is that as you come through it, if you just don't know and you're flush out of creative ideas, but you want to make it successful and you want to get a net promoter score with your team members and solve for the problems that to help for upskilling, reskilling, and provide career development opportunities, help bring them in, involve them, find ways to nominate them and bring them into the fold to actually help problem solve with you. Maybe you create initiatives and projects where you can coincide and work together to pilot things out. But those are the things that I would encourage to really make it more focused about the end user, the learner, the customer, ultimately, that you're trying to provide for that firsthand experience, to make sure that what you design is going to have an impact and effect. Because I think on the next slide, I think there's a meme visual representation of how when we start out, if you're saying an instructional designer putting a lot of love and care into your learning program that you're trying to roll out, when you get to the actual delivery of how it happens and how it's received versus with the different tools that you're having in your ecosystem, it might not be the exact same experience that you envisioned in the first place. So the whole idea is like, how can we make it so that it's as intended and as advertised and ultimately as you're hoping to achieve. If you would go to the next slide for me. The other thing I want to talk about is the amount of money that's at stake, because all the time and effort that we spend into curating these programs designed to really have an impact and effect of other people's lives and other causes that we're trying to support and create, is that we are currently spending $350 billion globally on learning and development and for trying to provide training programs. So it's a crazy, silly amount of money when you look at that. And then when you think about the feedback you get and you hear from everyone, only 12% of what the L&D programs are providing is actually affecting where it can be applied directly to their skill sets to their careers. And so applicability is absolutely key, because right now, north of $300 billion is literally just going off to nowhere. I mean, it's going to someone, because you have people that are kind of investing in the same learning programs that aren't having the effect that they desired effect that they think that they are. But we are spending a silly amount of money on things that are not allowing for people to apply directly to their careers. So I just want to call out the amount of money that gets lost in that process. Now, really a lot of that is because we're just simply not listening. And I think once we incorporate that into how we build out our learning programs and adapt and evolve ourselves, I think we're going to see a lot more ROI in that money that we make investments in. So Claude, I'll turn it back over to you.
Yeah, so real quickly, and we still have one more strategy to go to, so I'm going to go over this fairly quickly. But, the bottom line of what Chris is saying really is that what learning needs to do is answer the question, what's in it for the learner? What's in it for me? And you have to do that, and this graphic shows the data, by aligning learning with learners' personal and professional goals, as well as with the objectives that the business has. So there's got to be that mutual benefit of learning, and that's the missing thing. That's why that money is going into the air, as Chris said. You also have to enable feedback and allow learners to give their feedback and rate it, and then be iterative in making the learning better as time goes on and not be wedded to a particular thing. And then last but not least, of the things that I'll mention is recognizing and rewarding learners for learning, not just, the fun badges, but also certification programs and also additional opportunities like, team projects or other opportunities that are based on their achievements. And just real quick, the other thing that I really want to focus on is the need to reinforce the learning. It's a continuous learning journey. And here we ask people, do you want to be nudged or have reinforcement of learning after you have some sort of training? 90% said yes. 90% of people don't agree on anything in America, but 90% of people agreed on this. Not only that, in terms of reinforcement, is 77% of respondents said they want the learning to be reinforced for at least 2 months, not a couple of days, not a couple of exercises, for 2 months. 42% they wanted reinforcement for 3 months or more. The reason I bring this up, that just speaks volumes of how people learn, right? They're not going to grasp it all at once. They need to be reinforced. They need to be able to practice. They need to be able to digest it and make it and work it through their brain the way it works for them. All right, we're going to switch gears now and go into recruiting your employees to stay. So what does that mean? Really, everything we've talked to, the first 4 strategies really ties into this, because all of the things we're talking about is really a combined effort to creating an environment that makes employees want to stay with your company. So the challenge organizations have now is, as I like to say, recruit, quote unquote, to stay with them rather than searching for those greener pastures rather. One of the things that happens is organizations recruit people in and they wine and dine employees and they promise them a lot. And then the reality of the work world occurs, and that promise of opportunity often fails. So that's why all the things we're talking about are so important, is we need to create an environment where that doesn't happen. We've done in the hiring world a pretty good job of working to onboard and orient external candidates. But when it comes to internal candidates being promoted, working at different departments, making a lateral move, I hear HR folks talking all the time to me about how much onboarding do you think we really need? How much of transition time do they really need? Because we need to get this moving. But they're not thinking about the employee in that. The employee needs time to breathe. The employee needs time to go from one environment to another. And by that, I'm not talking weeks and months, but they need some time to digest the fact they're moving into a big change. So how do you create that environment? Chris is going to talk a lot about this, but I want to set the foundation, and that is, I think the foundation for all of this is creating a foundation of having a growth mindset and a team mindset. Most of you probably knows what that is, right? Growth mindset is having people believe that they can grow and develop, and that their brains and their talent are just a starting point, and they can go from there. The potential is unfixed, and that they can grow. And then team mindset builds naturally on that growth mindset, because the team mindset says we can do it better together. So growth says we can all grow. Time mindset says, and we can do it all better if we work together. And that creates that culture of collaboration and everybody working together. So it's a combination of a culture where we're capable of growing and then can work together. So I'll turn it over to Chris to take us the rest of the way.
Sure, thanks, Claude. Yeah, so the real key in a lot of this, honestly, that really kind of ties almost all of it together, is really conversation. It's something very simple. It's something that, or seemingly simple, but it's pretty hard to master. And so I think the real key that you're going to find with leaders and culture and being able to create those connections, it's really going to all be about how they talk to each other. That is, honestly, for me, I think it's the key. So the ways and how you can do that is you can start with the beginning of purpose of where the heck you guys are going together. So a couple of questions you can ask yourself to ask and try to define and get alignment to try to have a a shared vision, is to, borrow from Simon Sinek, starting with why. There's a handful of questions you can kind of ask yourselves to see where you want to go. But oftentimes what I hear is that in the conversations they might not have the managers might not have the tools equipped with them because they're not people. They got put into place because of their expertise within a process or a system. So there's a lot of unique tools out there that you can leverage today if these questions are hard to define and talk about. So I think that, there's a company called meetgroove.com where you can actually get a manager toolkit to talk about the career conversations, where it gives you the words and a process and how you can self-discover together kind of different areas of focus for what drives their career, what matters to them, and how you can supply work and purpose along with that. So I would encourage checking out different tools like that where, you don't always need technology, and there's some simple solutions out there, because really all you should care about is talking and having those conversations happen and making sure that they're frequent. And really, if you skip to the next slide here, one of the things that you'll find is actually it doesn't always have to be in person, as we believe that it needs to be that way. It's not really about whether it's in person or whether it's virtual. What Gallup has said and proven in the research is that it's not where they are, but what they hear. It's the intentionality of what you're saying and giving them the sense that you're listening to them. Because if we go to the next slide, that's going to be arguably more important in the process of the conversation, is listening directly to your team members and being present in that conversation. I love the kind of the take that Adam Grant has taken in this with the power of listening and what it can have. So really what it ultimately, if I just highlight a few things and how he frames it, is that it's a display of respect and expression of care. And it gives our most precious gift that we have to offer, which is our attention, the being present in that conversation. And so by doing so, ultimately by showing and demonstrating your intention to care, is that it's going to be opening up doors for them to be more willing to listen to what you have to say. And so that's really the key process in opening up that conversation, to have that dialogue between the team members and the managers.
Yeah, that really drives that spirit of creating an environment that people want to stay, and that all goes together to kind of recruiting your employees to stay. Here's a few questions for you to consider. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it because we do have one question I want to get to in just a couple of minutes we have remaining. But this will help you kind of think through how to do a better job of retaining your talent by treating internal job candidates as well or better than external candidates, and really looking at career development and how you integrate learning and enable managers to be better partners. All of that is really critical. But the question we got, Chris, if you can just touch on it in the couple of minutes we have left, is people wanted a little bit more elaboration on the peer-to-peer collaboration. What are some of the best ways to promote that peer-to-peer collaboration, especially in this hybrid connected environment?
Yeah, great question. I mean, because like I said, we changed and pivoted our whole concept of that for our organization. Like that was actually the key driver, was to help embrace peer-to-peer for people to work alongside with one another. So one of the things that that we created within our feature set is our breakout rooms are completely different to help to support that. Where what I think you should do is look at the ways to remove the distractions, the disruptions in the process of what are the barriers to allow for people to connect and spend time with one another. And so if it's technology, I think that you got to find something that focuses on the experience. You might have to spend a little bit more money, but as long as people are not worrying about how they can share their screen, how they click the link to be taken out to some other third-party app, by bringing it all into one place to have a good, seamless, smooth experience is going to be the kind of the key process. So that way you have less disruptions in the conversation as you can hopefully create a grassroots ability for others to learn from one another in that process. Additionally, I think you have to think again around everyone as a customer and put yourself in their shoes. So think about accessibility. Oftentimes I hear that there's a lot of missed opportunities for people to connect and collaborate on different things. And it could be something as simple as your time zone changes that are different. And so just really think and consider the different aspects of how people are joining and providing accessibility opportunities for those to even get into the peer-to-peer interactions that you're hoping to create. So smooth experience with technology, followed up by making sure that it's accessibility and providing opportunities in an equitable way are the two things I would harp on for the last remaining minute that we have left in the conversation.
So that's a great way to end. And Chris, thanks so much for your insights today. Thanks again to Class Technologies for sponsoring. Thanks to all of you for taking time out of your busy days to spend with us. We look forward to connecting on another webinar in the near future. Have a great afternoon, and good luck in excelling in the hybrid environment of work. Bye-bye.